All right, let's get right into it. Today we're talking about a fighter who is, and there's really no debate here, one of the most dominant, innovative, and, most controversial athletes in the history of mixed martial arts. We're talking about Jon "Bones" Jones. He's a guy who reached the absolute summit of his sport, but his journey is this incredible, complicated story of pure genius and personal turmoil.
And let's just start with his own words, because this one quote, it really gets to the heart of the entire paradox of his career. Inside that octagon, he was the absolute master of control. He controlled the distance, he controlled the pace, he controlled his opponent's emotions. But outside of it, well, that's where the story gets a whole lot messier.
So this is the big question, right? It's the puzzle that really defines Jon Jones. How can someone with such insane discipline and intelligence inside the cage just seem to make decisions that threaten to burn it all down? That's what we're going to unpack today.
And look, especially for any young fighters watching this isn't just some biography. Think of it as a case study, a real-world lesson in what it means to handle immense talent, the crushing weight of pressure, and that constant fight that happens both in the spotlight and behind closed doors. Okay, so let's rewind. Let's go all the way back to the beginning. Before all the controversy, before the endless pound-for-pound debates, there was just the arrival. And man, it was something the sport had never ever seen before. The one thing you have to see here is the speed. Just look at that timeline. From his very first pro fight to becoming the UFC champion in less than 3 years. He didn't climb the ladder, he strapped a rocket to his back and just launched himself to the top. It wasn't a slow burn, it was an absolute explosion onto the scene. And this number says it all, 23. At an age where most fighters are just hoping to get a shot, Jon Jones was dismantling a legend in Mauricio Shogun Ra to become the youngest champion in UFC history. That's a record that still stands today, and it's just proof that he was a true once-in-a-generational talent.
But look, being a phenom is one thing. Staying dominant is a whole other level. So how did he do it? This wasn't just about being a gifted athlete. This was a complete reinvention of what a fighter could be.
The secret weapon was his fight IQ. Jones fought like a grandmaster, playing chess in the middle of a hurricane. He would collect data on his opponent in the first round, figure out their patterns, and then just dismantle them piece by piece. His mind was every bit as dangerous as his kicks or his elbows. People who trained with him said he could see what you were going to do before you even knew it yourself.
And this blueprint really shows you what I'm talking about. He didn't just win with the same old stuff, he brought totally new weapons to the game. That oblique kick, for example, so controversial, but so incredibly effective at destroying an opponent's mobility from way outside. He turned his long arms into traps. He was literally changing the meta of the sport, fight by fight.
And you have to look at who he was doing this to. This isn't just some list of contenders, this is a straight-up murderer's row of legends. He didn't just beat champions, he systematically took apart an entire generation of the sport's icons, and he had a different game plan for every single one of them.
Now, he wasn't doing this all alone. You have to give credit to the environment at Jackson Wink MMA. They turned the idea of a training camp into a strategic think tank. For them, breaking down fight tape and analyzing data was just as important as sparring and lifting weights.
And with Jones, there's always a but. As his star was rising higher and higher inside the cage, a dark cloud started to form outside of it. The master of control was about to meet an opponent that he just couldn't outsmart.
And this is the question that really hangs over his entire career, doesn't it? After all that strategic brilliance against the baddest men on the planet, the one fight he couldn't seem to win was the one against his own impulses.
In this timeline, man, it's just tough to look at. You can see how the pattern just kept repeating. These aren't losses in the octagon. These are losses in life. Every single one of these incidents stopped his career in its tracks, cost him his belt, and put a huge stain on a legacy that should have been untouchable.
And here you can see it laid out side by side. The contrast is just staggering. Inside the cage, a tactical genius with a nearly flawless record, his only loss being a bizarre disqualification he was dominating. Outside the cage, a string of reckless decisions, showing a total lack of that control he perfected in his job. It's the ultimate paradox.
But here's what makes the Jon Jones story so absolutely captivating. For every single fall from grace, there was an unbelievable comeback. His ability to pull himself out of the fire and reclaim his throne is honestly a legendary story all on its own.
3. Think about that number. That's how many times the UFC stripped Jon Jones of a championship belt because of things he did outside the cage.
For pretty much any other fighter on Earth, that's the end of the line. For Jon Jones, it was just another mountain to climb. 2. That's how many weight divisions he conquered. After ruling the light heavyweight division with an iron fist for a decade, he decided to go after the biggest prize in all of combat sports, the heavyweight title.
You really have to let this sink in for a second. After 3 entire years away from the sport, dealing with all his issues, he moves up to a new, more dangerous weight class and submits one of the most technical heavyweights in the world in about 2 minutes. It was just a jaw-dropping statement that his greatness wasn't defined by time or by weight.
So where does that leave us? What do you do with all of this? How do we even begin to define a legacy that is equal parts brilliant and, well, broken? That's the final chapter.
I mean, if you just look at the cold hard data, the numbers don't lie. The most wins in UFC title fight history, the second best takedown defense of all time, and maybe the most insane stat of them all. In his entire career against the biggest punchers in the world, he has never, not once, been knocked down. Statistically, the argument for him being the greatest of all time is pretty much airtight.
But his legacy is so much bigger than numbers on a page. It's about his impact. He fundamentally changed the DNA of mixed martial arts. He proved that strategy and systems could beat brute force. Champions today like Israel Adesanya will tell you straight up that Jones was their blueprint. He didn't just play the game, he changed the rules.
And that brings us right back to the beginning. With his own words, it's almost chilling, right? It shows he had this deep self-awareness. He understood his own internal battle. He knew that the greatest opponent he would ever face was the man in the mirror.
So,
we end on this question for you to think about. Was he a prodigy who just couldn't outrun his demons? Or a pariah whose greatness was just too undeniable to tarnish? The real answer is probably somewhere in the middle. But maybe the true lesson from the story of Jon Jones is a simple, powerful one. That the ultimate fight for control is always the one you have with yourself.